Imperial. If you're a Star Wars fan, you know what I'm talking about. But if you're a car fan, you also know what I'm talking about. The Chrysler Imperial, the peak luxury for the Chrysler brand. Yeah, Chrysler was once up there with the likes of Cadillac, Continental, Lincoln, Duesenberg, Pierce Arrow, Ford, Packard, and even LaSalle. They were there, reaching the pinnacle of American luxury. But what happened? Why did it disappear? And why can't Chrysler relive its glory days as a top-tier luxury marque? Well, if you want to know more about that, go back and listen to some of our previous podcasts about the Chrysler brand, rise and fall. But today we're here to talk about its one top-tier luxury car of all time, the Chrysler Imperial. Ranging from 1926 to 1993, this vehicle set out a brand new form of luxury for the Chrysler brand. And today, AutoLooks is going to take a look at that. Welcome back to the AutoLooks podcast. I am your host, as always, the doctor to the automotive industry, Mr. Everett J, coming to you from our host website at autolooks.net. If you haven't been there, stop by, check it out, read some of the reviews, check out some of the ratings, go to the Corporate Links website page, big or small, we have them all. Car companies from around the globe, all available in one direct location. That is the Corporate Links tab at the top of the page of AutoLooks. The AutoLooks podcast is brought to you by Ecom Entertainment Group and distributed by Podbeam.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email over at email@autolooks.net. So like I said in the beginning, the Chrysler Imperial. Oh yeah, I remember seeing these things back in the day, and I remember seeing it during its last iteration as a dedicated brand. Probably because the last iteration of its brand went out the year I was born, 1983. And if you don't know that year, that was also the year of Michael Jackson's Thriller music video, one of the top music videos of all time, as we pay homage to the demise of MTV and their music. Thanks for about 10, 15 years of music on TV. I got to give it over to Much Music, MTV's Canadian competition, who has actually had music on television a lot longer than MTV and was actually at one point bigger than MTV. But getting out of that, 1983 was the last year of the Chrysler Imperial as a dedicated brand. Pretty cool. Same year I was born. Kind of like that's when the minivan came out. Well, not as full context. We know the microbus or the Type 2 originally started the minivan market. 1983 is when the Caravan came out. So, a few things happened around the year I was born. So getting back to the Imperial. The Imperial nameplate lasted from 1926 to 1993, as we said in the intro. But from 1955 to 1983, the Imperial was its own nameplate in Chrysler, sitting atop the Chrysler brand. This is similar to what Lincoln did with the Continental nameplate for a short period of time. This made it sit above Chrysler's top-tier vehicle. And Chrysler's top-tier vehicle, back in the 20s, was the New Yorker. Now, a little history about the New Yorker. Great little car. It was top tier, and just kind of bring it up. It's actually in a book I wrote about my the AutoLook thing that I'm trying to get out. My first car I ever drove in my life was a 1990 Chrysler New Yorker 5th Avenue. Okay, go out, find a picture of that thing. It was big, and that was the first car I had to drive. I actually got behind the wheel of it and moved it up once when I was 15. But when I was 16 years old, I had to drive that thing. 1990. Gotta remember, the Imperial was still around at that point in time, and it sat above the New Yorker. Now, the first car to go under the Imperial nameplate was a Chrysler branded product. It used Chrysler's new Chrysler 6 engine, a 288.6 cubic inch, 4.7 liter, 6-cylinder engine at 92 horsepower. Front axle was solid and semi-elliptical leaf springs, while the rear was a differential axle and semi-elliptic leaf springs. This was chosen to set out a mark for Chrysler. Chrysler wanted to make a statement about its vehicles and set a brand new transcontinental speed record, traveling more than 6,500 miles in 1 week by using the Chrysler Imperial. Oh, yeah. You don't just create a car and try and find a market for it. You create a car and literally make a statement with it. And Chrysler did that with the Imperial name. Now, the Imperial name had been used previously by both Buick, Cadillac, and Packard for top-level limousines. but only as a tier marker, not as an actual branded product. The original model, first generation from 1926 to 1930, made 60 miles per hour in the 90s with its 4-speed transmission. Now, it was chosen in 1926 to be the Indy 500 pace car. And yes, the Indy 500 has actually been around a lot longer than Formula One series, the Brickyard. Okay, think about that. F1 is actually following in the footsteps of IndyCar, not the other way around. Even though I still love F1, but I go see IndyCar because it comes closer to my home. The Imperial nameplate was used on a variety of different body styles from Chrysler while working for Buick. Yeah, Walter P. Chrysler worked for Buick from 1911 to 1919, and he used the Imperial nameplate as a sub-branded moniker on a few Buick products back in that time. He had the 2- and 4-passenger roadsters, 2 with the rumble seat for 4 people. And if you don't know what a rumble seat is, go back and check these things out, because I remember my grandparents down south going to see a guy that was working. He was great at doing work on tractors, but he rebuilt cars, and he had an old Cadillac with a rumble seat in it. He popped it out. My grandfather, I never heard him say, a lot of sexual innuendos, like ever. And he looks at my grandma and goes, "Hey, remember these, Mom? Good old rumble seats, and you can go make whoopee in the rumble seats." Me hearing that and knowing what whoopee stood for, I'm like, whoa, Grandpa, that's pretty funny. Coming from my grandfather, that was like, when I knew them as little, they slept in 2 separate beds. So to hear him say that was neat. On top of that, there was the 4-seat coupe, the 5-passenger sedan, the Phaetons, and a top-of-the-line limo for the Buick. The limo had a glass partition between the front and rear passenger compartments. Those were Imperial-branded Buicks, made by Walter P. Chrysler. Now, when Chrysler left to create the Chrysler Corporation, he took his name with him. Knowing that Buick was no longer using it, he registered it and knew he wanted to use it for the top tier of his luxury marks from his company. But yet, Chrysler worked for General Motors, kind of like the Dodge brothers worked for Henry Ford. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different things there. It's a great history to go back and find out about some of these people and where they started. Now, the first generation from 1926 to 1930 was designed as the E80 after a guaranteed 80 miles per hour all-day cruising speed created for the top vehicle. A top-level town car limo at the time cost $5,495 in 1926. We're talking about the time when Henry Ford was selling his cars for only a couple $100. This was the vehicle of millionaires, or in today's society, we would think billionaires. In 2023 dollars, like I get it, this is 2 years ago, you'd be looking at $96,384 for this car, which by today's standards, you would still consider it a cheap luxury car. If we're talking about top-tier luxury vehicles in 2023, this Imperial would have to sit in a $500,000 to $1 million mark. So even by today's standards, this thing is actually pretty cheap for a luxury make. Now, $5,495 back in 1926, it was a little, way up there. By 1931, Chrysler wanted to change it around. The second generation came out. Now, only living 2 years, 1931 to 1933. Got to remember, this is the dirty 30s we're getting into. The 31 saw the Imperial 8 introduced with the new inline 8-cylinder engine. At a time the American market's going to crap, he still wanted to create an 8-cylinder engine for the top tier people that could still afford it. Styling was similar to the format of the Cord L29 torpedo shape, and with a few coachwork companies made custom body styles, one opting for a dictaphone installed in the early car, essentially being one of the first car phones in history. Now, if you go back and listen to our podcast about the Caravan, the history of the Caravan, you'll find out how many things that vehicle created. Multiple cup holders, dual sliding doors, fold-away seats. They pioneered that. Well, Chrysler, not actually Chrysler, a coach build company who worked with Chrysler, created a dictaphone installed in the vehicle. Now, you hear dictaphone. This isn't Flintstone style, okay? It's not like the dictabird. You talk to the bird, and the bird recites it and back to you. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch the live action Flintstones movie with John Goodman. It's funny. Also, you really want to see it, Halle Berry, back in the early days. Most custom coach work was done by LeBaron Incorporated. Now, remember that name, LeBaron. Oh, yeah, used by Chrysler later on. Custom coach builder from 1920 until the incorporation of Chrysler Corporation in 1953. It would later become its own package before becoming its own car later on. At this time, the Series CH was for the coach work, custom side, with the CL series set for the standard production product. So Coach, CH, Standard Series, CL. Kind of makes sense, right? Kind of like Disney World, Orlando. You got OR in it. Disneyland is LA. If you didn't know that one, that would freak me out when I found out about it like 2 years ago. It would only live 2 years. The third generation, 1934 to 1936, yet again, 2 years. But like we said, this is the dirty 30s. So things are changing. And in a depressed time, you have to change your vehicles. And Chrysler wanted to do that. 1934 saw the introduction of the new Airflow design onto the Imperial nameplate. The Airflow was a streamlined design to mimic the Art Deco trains to improve fuel efficiency at a time when people didn't care about fuel efficiency. Now, last year we did a podcast about fuel efficiency, and if you've seen this one, our actual artwork for the front is an old Chrysler Airflow, not the Imperial Airflow, but a Chrysler Airflow. This thing thought about fuel consumption long before we ever needed to. Really wasn't until the 70s that the Americans really started thinking about this. But if you want to hear more about that, go back and listen to our podcast, Fuel Efficiency, and learn more information about that. The Airflow Series SV with Imperial Luxury Appearance Package was the first vehicle to be tested in a wind tunnel. Oh yeah, Chrysler really wanted to save people money on gas. He was the first automotive corporation in the United States thinking about this, thinking about your pocket. But you have to remember, it's the 1930s. It's a time when we were all thinking about trying to save money, even the rich. But the rich, being the rich, kind of like now, they didn't really think about that. Like they always say, if you can afford to buy a Lamborghini, you can afford to fill it up. I met a guy once, a mechanic shop years ago, an original Hummer H1. All he did was bitch about how expensive it was to fill it up. And this is at a time when gas is only getting towards like 84 cents a liter in Canada. We're sitting at an average of like $1.20 now. And he's bitching and complaining about it. I'm like, dude, if you can't afford to fill it up, why did you buy it? And I found out he's just a chronic complainer. So just leave that there. Now in the 1920s, these cars were seen better when pointed backwards due to the curved rear of the vehicles. This led to the rethinking of fundamental designs of Chrysler vehicles. They decided to give it a sloped design to reduce wind noise inside the passenger compartment, making it a lot more comfortable to travel. You didn't hear that sound coming through all the time. This also allowed the passenger compartment to be moved forward, giving better balance and essentially creating unibody construction in the process. The early car to adopt a one-piece curved windshield. Like, even go back and watch the movie Tucker, Preston Tucker. He got pop-out windshields, but it's still a two-piece. Chrysler had a curved one-piece windshield in the old Airflows. Like, this vehicle was an engineer's dream. The Imperial was only offered in the Chrysler Airflow offering. A 5.3-liter straight 8 with an overdrive manual transmission, a 2-door coupe, a 4-door sedan, a 4-door sedan, 4-door town sedan, and the limo variation. And in 1936 was the last year of the Airflow Imperial as sales dwindled due to consumer rejection of the design. Man, people were stupid. This thing was going to save your pocketbook. And they're like, I don't like the design. Dude, it looks like the cool-ass trains you're taking. You want to travel the country, you're hopping on one of these Art Deco trains. Why don't you want to drive an Art Deco vehicle? I don't get people back. From 1937 to 1939, yet again, 2 more years, a 4th generation came out. In 37 was the introduction of the torpedo style and back to a body-on-frame architecture. As Chrysler realized the market didn't want to save money and didn't really care about all those good brand-new safety features. Okay, we'll put that in the back burner. We'll think about that years later. We want to make money, right? We're a business. So they moved the headlights into the front fenders, similar to the Airstream. Imperial Custom, Town Sedan Limo, and Imperial Custom Series CW, top executive, were the main models. The Imperial Custom C15 convertible sedan by Durham was used as the AAA official car of the 1937 Indy 500. This was the 25th anniversary race of the Indy 1912. Pretty cool, huh? You got to think about it. Formula One, we're celebrating 75 years. 75 years, that puts me back to 1950. But the Indy's been around since 1912. Pretty cool. 1938, Series C19 Imperial shared with the New York Special, soon to become the New Yorker in 1939. And that's not the newspaper, that's a New Yorker car, which eventually became the cool car I drove. One of the Imperial Custom convertible town cars by Durham was specially built for the 1939 Royal Tour of Canada when they toured the United States. Now, I got to remember, we did our podcast about McLaughlin Motors. Royal family at that point in time used our McLaughlins while touring Canada. In the States, they used an Imperial from Chrysler. This car was donated to the Detroit American Legion Post after its use. From 1940 to 1948, finally lasting longer than 2 years, the 5th generation Imperial comes out. Of course, this is also due to a wartime effort. You didn't really change a lot of shit in the 1940s. Okay? The 1940 Imperial Crown Series C27 was the only vehicle to wear the Imperial nameplate. Offered as a 6-passenger sedan, 8-passenger sedan, 8-passenger limo, and a 6-passenger Durham Parade Phaeton. That's all they had for the Imperial Crown Series C27. The limo offered a retractable glass partition between the driver and the passenger with leather up front and wool in the passenger compartment for a little bit more comfort. But they used leather up front because it was easy. Gotta remember, Phaetons a lot of times did not have a roof over top of the driver. So when your millionaire owner forces you to go out and drive through these bad, horrible conditions like snow and rain, you're going to be able to at least clean this thing off a lot easier. And they did. 1942, the New Yorker replaced most of the Imperial products with the Imperial Crown Series, C37, as the only Imperial badge product. Production was suspended from February 1942 to 1946 due to the wartime efforts, as discussed. During this time, Cadillac borrowed the Imperial name for its 70 Series limo. So yeah, Cadillac borrowed the name because Cadillac didn't get involved in the war. That was more General Motors. Ford and Chrysler helped out in the war effort a lot more than GM. So Cadillac was still using vehicles, but they utilized the Imperial nameplate, borrowing it from Chrysler. Chrysler knew he still had it registered. By the end of 1948, the Imperial was on its way out. So the wartime effort came back, and Chrysler really didn't think this car would last. Lo and behold, 1949, a 6th generation shows up. From 1949 to 1954, the Imperial returned, but as one of the lowest production dates for the range. 50 Imperial sedans and 85 Imperial Crown limos were produced. Early 49 models were left over 48, with the new 49s not being available until after March 1949. So essentially, it was almost a 1950 model. 1950 may have been a year for the first disc brake systems from Chrysler. Hot shot, but Chrysler was already using them on the 49 Imperials. So yeah, somebody tells you, Chrysler used disc brakes. No, the 49 Imperials, which were actually made in 1948, had disc brakes just before Chrysler introduced them. The hot shot was not as good in areas with lots of road salt and thus were converted back, unlike the Imperials. Chrysler, on the other hand, had a better 4-disc brake system, which was more complex and expensive, but which put it out in the mainstream limelight. Chrysler discs were self-energizing. Small balls set over oval holes would be forced up during braking, forcing the discs further apart and augmenting braking energy. This meant lighter pressure than the calipers, avoided brake fade, promoted cooler running, and provided more friction surface than Chrysler's standard 12-inch drums. It was a great technology, but this meant that it was expensive and only could be afforded on the Imperial lineup. They weren't going to put on standard Chrysler products or even Plymouth or Dodge. No, this is too damn expensive. You got to put it on your top tier vehicles because those are the only people that are going to buy these things. The 1950 Imperial is essentially a New Yorker with a custom interior and less chrome. Kind of weird because it's a top-end product. You thought it would be more chrome. 1952 saw the loss of the convertible due to low sales, but it also saw the introduction of the 5.4-liter Hemi Head V8, not a hemispherical or Hemi. It was called the Hemi Head V8 back in the day, and Hydra Guide power steering. 53 saw the loss of the Club Coupe, but the addition of the one-piece windshield yet again from back in the 1930s with the airflow design. Chrysler's first fully automatic transmission. This was only to test the phase out in 53. The automatic transmission wouldn't fully roll out until 1954. They did beat Cadillac, Buick, and Oldsmobile to the mark with the introduction of the first automotive air conditioning in vehicle. This was seen 12 years previous, but not made its way into the mainstream until the 1953 Imperials. So yeah, the Imperials had air conditioning way back in the day, but really didn't make it to the mainstream products. It was only a top tier. The air temp system was better than traditional air conditioning systems as it was more efficient. It cooled the air from the top down and was available with 3 settings on the dash, only taking 2 minutes to drop from 120 degrees Fahrenheit to 85. This system drew the freshest air, which it recirculated. This kept down dust, pollen, tobacco smoke, and humidity in the car and was unobtrusive like the competition's. So Chrysler made not just a great air conditioning system, an air purifying system. It was amazing. But this was also going to be the end of the Imperial as a Chrysler product. Because when 1955 showed up, the first generation of the Imperial nameplate showed up. Chrysler saw that its Imperial name was a top-tier luxury mark, and they wanted to make it a top-tier luxury mark. So for a short 1-year period from 1955 to 1956, Chrysler created the Imperial nameplate vehicle just to take over for where the 54 Imperial left off. Essentially just running the end of the 54 Imperials for 2 more years, but only as an Imperial product. 1955 is when Chrysler removed its badges from the Imperial products. It moved the nameplate onto its own separate mark. Chrysler did this to better compete with Cadillac and Lincoln, with the latter forming the Continental brand just after the Imperial. This would push Chrysler into the premium to luxury field, with the Imperial sitting atop the stable as the dominant luxury brand. By April 1955, Imperial added on the first all-transistor car radio, which gave the Imperial an edge over the competition. Transistor radio, come on, man. We can listen to music from anywhere now. Unlike the competition, Imperial was not separated out from a standalone Chrysler dealerships. It shared the floor with Chrysler products, which confused consumers into it only being a Chrysler Imperial and not its own brand. A lack of proper marketing as a standalone dealers led to Imperial nameplate to be still being confused as a lackluster image. So essentially saying that Chrysler should have created its own dedicated dealerships or its own dedicated division within the dealerships to separate the Imperial from Chrysler products. People already knew it as a Chrysler Imperial. You needed to make it as its own brand. Similar designs to Chrysler products made the Imperial nameplate hard to sell on its own. All Imperials came with V8 engines and automatic transmissions with the style changes every 2 to 3 years. Kind of quick, but new tech would be available on Imperials first, making them the test bed for products. Sound familiar? Cadillac. In 1957, the second generation Imperial came out. This one lasted a lot longer. They originally wanted only 2 to 3 years for Imperial products. Now they're changing it up because the second generation Imperial went from 1957 to 1966. 1957 became the first year Imperial had its own design and platform. No more Chrysler New Yorker looks. Imperials were made larger than the standard Chrysler product to ensure maximum interior comfort. They were small when compared to Cadillac's 120,000 units sold, but Imperial was still there. Cadillac did not like this and implemented the Chrysler Imperial sales tactic, where they wanted to go after and steal customers away. This was used to make consumers think that they were purchasing an overpriced Chrysler and not a top-tier luxury make of its own. But quality would soon be on Cadillac's side as a 2-year design change led to failing torsion bars, which failed due to its high production that year. Better sales were working against Imperial along with the Cadillac sales team, so they had their work cut out for them. By 1958, they saw the introduction of cruise control autopilot, as they called it back in those days, power door locks, but sales slipped to only 16,000 sold. Cadillac and quality were working against the Imperial nameplate. Dealerships were even more frustrated as consumers still referred to them as Chrysler Imperials. A lack of standalone dealers was failing the brand, as being sold alongside Chrysler products made it seem it was just another Chrysler product to begin with. The introduction of a dedicated dealer network would have helped save the separate mark, but this never transpired. By 1959, saw the Imperial move onto its own dedicated manufacturing site. This would later close in 62 as the cost and slipping sales would move the Imperial back into Chrysler lineups. The 1960 Imperial beat Lincoln on the sales side again, but this would be its last time. From 1960 to 1966, Imperials was the only brand in the Chrysler stable to keep utilizing perimeter frame layout. This was done for its rigid appeal and comfort in maximizing space. An X frame was added for extra strength, with the drive shaft passing through a hole in the X to ensure the structure stayed. All other products slowly switched over to unibody construction, whereas the Imperial stayed on the full frame. Torsion bars and rigid structure meant the Imperial handled better than the competition's, but still being sold in Chrysler dealerships was working against it. 57 saw the return of the convertible and became Imperial's best-selling year with 37,593 cars. 1962, the Imperial had the idea to make a similar offer to increase its sales and lineup, but it never made it past the boardroom. Yeah. And this was just after 1961 when Chrysler hired Elwood Engel, the man behind the Lincoln Continental, to head up the Imperial design. Would use a similar design for the 64 Imperial with only minor changes to make it an Imperial product. This would not prove successful enough to lift the Imperial's image, but it did lift its sales to its second best year, 23,295. Imperial's fortunes were turning as the automotive critic Tom McGale gave the Imperial rave reviews, giving the product a reputation as the driver's car among the top luxury makes. This improved sales and lifted Imperial out of Cadillac shadow. Tom raved about the luxury of the Imperial product, comparing it to a luxury train with a comfortable ride over long trips. But unfortunately, this would work against it. 1966 was the final year for the original Imperial platform from 56, as the Imperial was starting to transition. 66, if you didn't know this, was also the year of the most famous Imperial in history, Black Beauty from the Green Hornet TV series starring Bruce Lee and Van Williams. Yeah, Bruce Lee. This would be the basis of the 2011 movie car as well. Black Beauty did carry a larger engine as well as the introduction of the 440 cubic inch 7.2 liter V8 because, the Green Hornet is something bigger, better, and more capable than the standard Imperial. The third generation of the Imperial nameplate was a product from 1967 to 1968. By 67, the Imperial offered three ranges of product: the Custom, the Crown, and LeBaron. This was the first year for the C-body unibody platform. The changeover from the D-body to the C-body was done to save costs as the Imperial lineup was running on its own architecture with limited sales. Chrysler couldn't justify the cost anymore, and the times were changing, so they needed the unibody platform. Its design was still different, which kept it apart from the Chrysler products. In 67 saw the introduction of the mobile director seal on Crown Coupes. This was the front passenger seat turned to face the rearward with a small table and a high-intensity light. The idea was for executives could work on the move on their own or with their secretary. Unfortunately, only 81 of these models were ever sold with this option, which was nearly $600 at its time, when the coupe just cost $6,000. So, gotta think about that. That's almost adding 10% to your cost. From 69 to 73, the fourth generation Imperial came out. In 69, we saw the introduction of the fuselage look, which curved out of the side of the previous squared style from 64 to 69. Remember that, like a Continental box style from the 60s. Gotta remember, two box designs were big in the 60s. For the first time since 1956, the Imperial would share its body shell with the New Yorker. This was done to save costs as the Imperial line was losing sales still. Cadillac was still kicking its ass. In 69 would become Imperial's third best-selling year as a LeBaron became its coupe. 1970 would only see a two-model lineup, the sedan and coupe profiles, with the LeBaron Crown series. This would take a bite out of sales, as Imperial nameplate sales would be cut in half for 1970. 1971 saw the loss of the Imperial Eagle on the hood, replaced by the word Imperial instead. So we've now lost our logo. All those crown jewels from back in the day, the old radiator cap logos, like Rolls-Royce still has to this day. The fifth generation Imperial product from 74 to 75. Imperial was nearly lost at the end of the 73 due to its low sales, one design, and similar parts to the Chrysler offerings. Cadillac and Lincoln were beating the Imperial, but a last-minute save from Elwood Engel kept the Imperial alive a little bit longer. To save money, the Imperial would use the New Yorker bodywork with a different front end, clip, and trunk lid. And for the first time since becoming a separate brand, it would use another Chrysler's platform. Sales were strong in 73, even with the oil crisis at 14,483 being sold. But 75 would see even less than half of this disappear. 75 would be the end of the line for the Imperial nameplate, as the last one would roll off the line in June 12th, 1975. A black LeBaron hardtop, last one to roll off the production line. But we all know this would not disappear, as the trim would change to the Chrysler New Yorker Brougham from 76 to 78. The Imperial wasn't done yet. Chrysler still knew the Imperial nameplate meant something, as it had been around since 1926. And knowing this, Chrysler decided during the 80s and the rise of luxury brands once again to bring it back. From 1981 to 1983, the sixth generation of the Imperial product came out. All was not lost as Chrysler revived the name and the brand from 1981 as the Imperial product, dedicated Imperial product. With Lee Iacocca at the helm, Chrysler wanted to emulate upscaling of the 67 Thunderbird into the 69 Continental Mark II. Iacocca wanted to instill trust from consumers that Chrysler was here to stay. The J platform coupe arrived with no Chrysler badges, but would appear to create the illusion of top-tier luxury. This platform was also used for the Cordoba and the Murata, and Chrysler would go one step even further, using Frank Sinatra to market the car. The new Imperial was subjected to an increase in quality assurance as the new car was built in the adjacent Windsor plant. Yes, the Imperial, last dedicated Imperial product, was Canadian built. Think about that. The Imperial was a special car for a special owner, so its quality was a top priority. It became a fully electronic digital instrument even provided in its production-built American car. Fully digital. It even had a special Frank Sinatra edition of the Imperial, which came only in glacier blue crystal paint, said to match Frank Sinatra's eyes. It came with 16 cassette tapes of Sinatra's titles, which came in a special leather case. So if you ever find one of these Frank Sinatra Special Edition Imperials, make sure it comes with a special leather case and all 16 Sinatra tapes. Has to be every single one of his titles released by that point in time, or you ain't getting a perfect Imperial. Trust me, if you're looking for a good collector car from back in those days, this is it, and it has to have every single thing with it. And the original glacier blue paint looks like Sinatra's eyes. What is Frank Sinatra, for God's sakes? If you don't know who Frank Sinatra is and you're listening to this podcast, go out and learn about him, okay? The Rat Pack. The first one rolled off the line on August 11th, 1980, and ended on April 29th, 1983. So yeah, this car even ended before I was born. It was still in production the year I was born, but ended before I was born. Naturally, again, that was due to sales and cost. A few did manage to be used for NASCAR spec race cars, qualifying for the 85 Daytona 500 at 197 miles per hour, even without a race spec engine. They had a coefficient of drag of 0.41, which is less than Corvettes at that point in time. So the last dedicated Imperial name was pretty neat. But yet again, Chrysler would not give up on the Imperial nameplate. Even though it disappeared in 83, 7 years later, it would return once again, utilizing a New Yorker platform. Yes, the same one that I drove. 1990 saw the reintroduction of the Imperial nameplate for its last time as a Chrysler branded product, unfortunately, using the New Yorker Fifth Avenue platform for its body, but having different rear taillights and a front waterfall grille. Mine just had a standard grille. Kind of looked like a Rolls Royce. Think about it. With that little quartz Chrysler logo on the front. Remember? Yeah, it was cool. Made to replace the dated Fifth Avenue New Yorker that I was driving. The first time, it was on a front-wheel drive platform with only a V6 engine. Now, remember, these things started out as life with a V6 engine, but had gone through most of their life with dedicated V8s, but never were on front-wheel drive. Even the one in 83 was rear-wheel drive. Something not seen since the early days. 93 would be the end of the Imperial nameplate altogether, as a change from the Y-body to the C-body layout, as Chrysler would usher in the LHS to replace the last of the Imperials. The New Yorker would live on for another 3 years on the LH platform, but eventually giving way for Chrysler to bring back the 300 nameplate. Fortunately, the Imperial would end its run in 1993. From 1926 to 1993, the Imperial nameplate has sat atop Chrysler's stable. And without a top-tier luxury image left after the fall of the 1980s, Chrysler has had no need for the Imperial name. Of course, that was until 2006, when we saw the introduction of the Imperial concept at the Detroit Auto Show. It was styled similar to a Rolls-Royce Phantom, because we all know what it wanted to go after. This concept was never meant to be grin-like, because with Chrysler at the helm, this product would compete with its Maybach products. Trust me, Mercedes did not want to compete with any of its own brands. That's why they kept Chrysler more in a premium range than going back to full luxury. Like I said, the Daimler-Chrysler marriage was the worst thing that ever happened to Chrysler. It essentially the day they signed that was signing the death note for Chrysler. The concept would have brought back a top-tier luxury nameplate to the Chrysler, along with the V8 luxury. Now, we all know the 300 eventually would do that. Chrysler stated that fuel costs and more stringent fuel standards led to the fall of this product. This project led to a second-generation LY or 300C platform and could have brought back the New Yorker nameplate, but it never came to be. Could Chrysler actually make a go of it? Like today with this concept? No. I don't believe so because Stellantis is now trying to move DS up into the same market of luxury as products like Maybach and even the Horch editions of Audi. And right now, Stellantis is having trouble trying to deal with its 14 separate divisions and how to keep them all alive. If Chrysler was able to break itself away from the Stellantis hold, become its own car company once again as Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, and Jeep, they could essentially keep this around and bring back the Imperial nameplate. The Imperial name, even in Stellantis form, could be the only product in their stable that could compete with the likes of Rolls-Royce and Bentley. DS is never going to get that high because people still have that image of the original DS, sure, technological marvel from the 1960s and into the 70s, but it was never a Rolls-Royce competitor. Wasn't big enough, wasn't most powerful. DS can do all it wants, but it'll never be there. Maserati can be seen as an Italian competitor to Rolls-Royce and Bentley. But then again, we still have to have that sport appeal because the Italian cars always have to be nimble. Only Chrysler and its Imperial nameplate or even the New Yorker nameplate could ever compete with Rolls-Royce and Bentley from the Stellantis range. It is the only nameplate in the entire range that could ever compete on the same table. Why? Because it's the only nameplate and only product that people could see as competition for that because they remember its history of being a top-tier luxury brand, going after products like Pierce Arrow, Cadillac, Duesenberg, LaSalle, Continental from Lincoln. Like this thing went after top-tier luxury. So if anyone from Stellantis is actually listening to this podcast, utilizing the Imperial nameplate, bring back luxury. Hell, you can even use the Chrysler name instead of adding a new product to your mix. And have the Chrysler Imperial build the big, bulky V8, fully customizable car like the 2006 Imperial concept. Hell, if Russia can do it with the RS and China can do it with Honky, how come America can't do it with the Imperial? That's something that Stellantis is going to have to take a look at. And maybe, just maybe, they might get a hold of us and ask us a few questions about how they truly can pull this off. Well, as you learned during the 1950s and 60s, Cadillac would do everything in its power to keep you from marching up that stable. Why? Because Cadillac is trying to move up that table as well. So if you like this podcast, please like, share, or comment about it on any of the major social feeds or streaming sites that you've found the AutoLooks podcast on. Like, share, comment, send us an email over at email@autolooks.net and tell us what you think. Should Chrysler bring back the Imperial nameplate? Should Stellantis use Imperial as its global, all-defying, high-end luxury mark? Should they bring Chrysler back from the dead and use Imperial to do this for them? Or should they literally just kill it off as they're considering it right now? Tell us in the comments. Tell us just below. Like I said, like us, share us, comment, tell your friends, tell your family, tell somebody at Chrysler that they need to do this. And after that, stop by the website, read some of the reviews, check out some of the ratings, go to the Corporate Links website page. Big or small, we have them all. Car companies from around the globe, all available on the AutoLooks.net website. And you can find all the images from the Chrysler Imperial nameplates available on our website. Remember, website, AutoLooks.net. The AutoLooks podcast is brought to you by Ecom Entertainment Group and distributed by Podbeam.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email over at email@autolooks.net. And for myself, Everett J., the Ecom Entertainment Group, Podbeam.com, and the AutoLooks.net website, strap yourself in for this one fun luxury ride that the Imperial nameplate is going to take us on.